Hey, good morning. This is Midweek Wednesday Mettle. Just a little bit of something to get you through the rest of this week. Let me ask you a question. Are you consumed? Have you been consumed? What's consuming you? Are you consumed by guilt and shame? Are you consumed by God's grace? That's what I want to talk about today. Let's be consumed by God's grace. How do we get God's grace? James chapter 4 says this, and I want to say it again, the writer says. This is from the New Living Translation. If you want to be a friend of the world, you make yourself an enemy of God. What do you think the scripture means when they say that the Spirit of God that has been placed within us is filled with envy? What's it mean to say that God's Spirit in us is filled with envy? Envy toward what? Envy for what? But he gives even more grace to stand against evil desires. As the scripture says, God opposes the proud, but favors the humble. In other words, God's envy for our souls consumes him. And he gives grace to those that will humble themselves in God's sight. That's what he says in verse 7. So humble yourselves before God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Come close to God, and God will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, a word that we don't use very often anymore. Purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world. Let there be tears for what you have done. Let there be sorrow and deep grief. Let there be sadness instead of laughter, and gloom instead of joy. Humble yourselves in the sight of God, and he will lift you up. Scripture says that if we will humble ourselves before God, he gives us even more grace. Have you been consumed by God's grace? He offers even more grace the more humble we become. And in the process, in his sight, he lifts us up. He lifts us up out of our shame. He lifts us up out of our guilt. Love this song from Hillsong. It's over 10 years old. It speaks of being consumed from the inside out. My heart and my soul, I give you control. Consume me from the inside out. And as I read in James chapter 4, when we do that, God gives even more grace. And the spirit that's inside of us is envious for us. He's jealous for us. He's zealous for us. This morning, I opened up the morning paper and I am involved in certain areas in our community to bring about justice. But I was really disappointed. A new policy by our district attorney is they're going to stop prosecuting people who don't show up for court dates. And the goal would be that somehow would be more just. In my mind, that creates more irresponsibility for those that have broken laws. So I'm puzzled by that. I think the way that we offer true justice and true grace is asking people to be accountable and responsible for their sins. And when they humble themselves in their failure, in their weakness, God then gives more grace. And this opportunity that we have to confirm forgiveness, yes, responsibility for actions, but confirm forgiveness. I think when I came to Christ, I was more consumed with fear about dying. I wanted to know what was going to happen to me after I died. As I've gone on serving the Lord, I'm realizing that it's not just knowing where I'm going to be for eternity by surrendering my life to Jesus and confessing my sins to Jesus. But I've also noticed that in life, when I make mistakes, when I disappoint others, when I sin, God in his great mercy and his zeal for me, his envy for my soul, so to speak, when I humble myself, confess those things, He gives me even more grace. I want to be consumed by His grace. I'm going to take responsibility for my actions, confess those things, and then just revel in the zeal that God has for me and revel in the grace upon grace that He offers through Jesus Christ. I want you to think about that this morning. I pray that you can be consumed by grace rather than fear of death. I'd rather have you be consumed by hope for eternity with God, consumed by hope for this moment rather than being consumed by grace, fear, and all the various intimidations this world is so good at throwing at us right now. Be strong. Love to talk to you more about this. You can contact me through Christ Community Church. Our website is www.ccclawrence.org. Have a great rest of this day and great rest of this week.